everyone, my name is Dr. Deirdre Ryan. I'm a clinical psychologist and director at Aruna Psychology, a group psychology practice based in Northcote in Melbourne. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about a range of different things, I guess, directly related to responding to COVID, but also in terms of being an Irish person here in Melbourne, going through all of this and how additionally challenging that can be in terms of not being able to access any of our supports at all and kind of really feeling that distance now more than ever, I guess. In terms of a little bit about myself, I moved over here 7 years ago. And I have a little boy called Oren. He's 3 years old now, and my partner Brian is also Irish as well, so we're both living here quite a few years now. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about making some space for the impact of COVID on all of us. We are all together going through this very collective grief process, I guess, and have experienced a lot of trauma. Our sense of safety in the world, our sense of predictability in the world, and being able to plan what's coming next has been totally pulled away from us, and that is incredibly distressing. I know just personally I had planned on going back to Ireland for 2 months, enjoy the Irish summer, or what there was of it, and have some time to really spend good quality time with family and friends for those 2 months and go to a couple of weddings. And mine is one of many similar stories of people who have lost opportunities to reconnect with their loved ones when they really need it most. And it's been an interesting parallel process as well. You know, some of what has been described to me by friends of mine that are Australian and clients alike is one of the most challenging aspects has been that ease of access to their family, and you know, thinking of parents to be able to access grandparents readily or have friends over and really have that kind of support network around. And you know, it's been interesting. I've been reflecting on that, thinking that for a lot of us Irish out here, that's an experience that we have all the time, you know, is not being able to access our family or friends when we want them to be next to them physically. And so it is an ongoing grief, I guess, that we have. It's an ongoing source of loss and distress for us. And one of the major things that I guess helps alleviate that is knowing that we can just get on a plane and go home and be home. You know, we're back in Ireland within a couple of days if we need to. But now that that's been taken away, that distance just feels even further. So it's a really, really challenging time for all of us. And I think that having access to social media and things like that makes it even more difficult when we're exposed to all these kind of comparisons and seeing what everyone is doing in Ireland and vice versa. So that also makes it kind of tricky, having this little window, being able to peer in but not be in there, not be connected to it. So I kind of think of ourselves at the moment in terms of needs, you know, that we all have an inner child, we all have a vulnerable child within us, and at the moment we're all very much feeling that, really feeling in that kind of lost child space, feeling overwhelmed and scared, and almost that feeling of being, you know, when you were younger and you were lost in the supermarket and looking for mum or dad and feeling quite overwhelmed and scared. And often what we tend to do when we notice that inner child kind of pop up and say, I feel scared, I feel overwhelmed, is to try ignore it or dismiss it or even be quite critical of it. For example, you know, experiencing a day where you might feel vulnerable and noticing that internally you start to disregard that by saying, well, it could be worse and other people have it worse and we just have to get on with it and get over it. And it can be quite, just quite dismissive, when there's really clearly a part of you that's saying, I have needs and I need to be listened to, I need to be attended to. You know, and a helpful way to think about this is if you imagine a small child coming to you crying, saying, I'm scared, I'm overwhelmed, I need help. Would you respond to that child by saying, well, get over it, other kids have it worse, come on, you're making too big a deal of this, or you know, it's because you're too weak, or you need to be stronger? Or would we respond by acknowledging that child's fears and validating it and saying, yeah, of course things feel really scary, and what do you need? How can I help? I'm here for you, and things are going to be okay. And that bit of reassurance and attention to that child, we need to give that to ourselves right now just as much. So what I would say is to kind of really, in those dark days and those tough days, rather than turning away from yourself, really turn inward and ask yourself, what do you need? Say to yourself, I'm listening. How can I help? What do you need? And really clearly those answers will come up, because only you truly know exactly what you need, what will work for you, what will comfort you. And it really can be quite lovely when you ask yourself, what do I need? That inner child says, I need such and such. You listen, you give that to your inner child, and then you can feel in your adult space again, you can feel a bit more present, focused, able to kind of move through these challenges. Just for an example of myself, recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I felt incredibly homesick, really down, missing my family so much, missing Ireland so much, knowing we were kind of in this next lockdown that we're in now, and weather being awful, so I was really feeling it. And because there's so much to hold at the moment, you know, noticing that even accessing phone calls or FaceTime was just that bit harder, because I just come to the evening, and when everyone's waking up after a day of work and coming home to my 3-year-old and being on at bedtimes being challenging, I was just so exhausted in the evening. So when everyone was ready to chat, I was just so wiped out. So it was kind of a fairly good gap of time where I hadn't talked to people at home properly, and I kind of just noticed myself move more and more into a kind of a darker headspace. And when I was sitting in that, I had a moment of realization of, okay, there's something that I need here, that a need isn't being met. And so I checked in with myself, and the adult part of me asked that younger inner child, what do you need? What's going on? And so I could clearly reflect that my need for safety and security and connection and nurturing, home basically, was not being met. My need for attention and care, these are some very fundamental core needs that we all have. We have them in childhood, but we also have them in adulthood. Needs for attention, needs for freedom, needs for safety, security, nurturing. And so I think that was everything that kind of home represented to me. And so where I couldn't transport myself back to Ireland, I could try and meet those needs in a little way that was achievable, that was tangible. And so for me, it meant picking myself up, going out to the shopping centre. In Coles there, they have an Irish section. So I got myself loads of Tato and brown bread mix and Galaxy chocolate, the proper chocolate. And when I went home, I put on some music that reminded me of home, that I would have listened to a lot before I moved out here, and got Oren involved in that and helped me make the bread. And that night I kind of felt I just had a little bit more energy then, so I had a really good chat with my mum. And the next day I just felt so much more present, that vulnerability and that overwhelm was gone, and I had met the needs of that inner child in a quite a simple way, where often when I feel homesick, I try push Ireland away, I try disconnect from it. But actually inviting it in and reconnecting to it just brought me closer to myself, and that I felt then I could just have that bit more capacity to kind of be in my authority, kind of be myself again and navigate all the challenges that were to come. So I guess that's just an example of an opportunity for you to just check in, you know, really simply just ask yourself, what do you need? How can I help? You meet those needs of your inner child, and then you can move back into your adult space. But really noticing if there's any inner critic or judgment that comes up around your vulnerabilities, if you are critical of them, if you have very high expectations of yourself right now to be okay and to not experience any of those more vulnerable emotions. We know that giving yourself a lot of judgment around that is going to actually make it last a lot longer. So finding ways to make space open up for anything that needs to come up, acknowledge it, meet the need, and then you'll be able to move on. So when we're thinking about COVID response specifically, you know, as I've touched on a little bit, it is so important to start acknowledging what your thoughts and feelings are, checking in with yourself a few times a day, you know, really checking in, asking yourself, how am I going? What am I feeling? And often your physical body will be the first indicator that you have that maybe you're holding a lot. So you might notice you're a bit more tense, or your heart rate is going, or you just have it's harder to kind of breathe deeply, so you just get caught when you're trying to take that kind of deeper breath. So really checking in with your body first, because that will be telling you how things are going. You know, often we think our brains will tell our body how we're feeling and what's happening, but it's quite a feedback loop. So your body will actually often tell your brain, hey, there's something going on here. So really check in with that. And if you are noticing you're holding, or there is something there, make space for it, acknowledge it, notice it. So noticing might be something that, rather than saying, I am stressed, or I am scared, or I am angry, it's kind of separating from that a little bit and saying, well, I'm noticing I'm feeling angry. I'm noticing I'm stressed. So you're being an observer of your inner experience rather than being it. And that's kind of the difference between being really swept up in the storm, being in the storm, or else being able to step back and watch it and recognize and know that it will pass. It will pass. So using some sort of imagery can be useful for that, like imagining when you get a really strong surge of emotion that it's like a wave that's going to really swell and then will ultimately go down. Or it's like the weather, it's always moving, it's always changing. And you can use that as an analogy as well. So if you imagine yourself as a ship in the sea, and a storm starts to rage, it starts to build up and build up. And while you can't stop the storm from raging, the storm is going to go. What you can do is lay down some anchors. Okay, so your anchors might be something like trying to focus on the things that are in your control versus the things that aren't. So at the moment, a lot of us are focusing on numbers and figures, like what are the numbers today and what the government are doing and what they're not doing. So these are all things that are out of our control, and they tend to leave us feeling more frazzled, more overwhelmed. Our kind of central nervous system is just going to be firing that bit more because things are already very chaotic and unpredictable. And so really sitting in that space of things we don't have control over will just exacerbate that feeling. Whereas focusing on things that you do have control over can just help to kind of ground you and again lay down that anchor. So things that you do have control over, your world, the things that you do in that. If you're still working, if you're a parent, the things that you can control, the things that you do, the limited access to activities that we have at the moment, but we can still do things within that space. Even you can control what you wear, generally what you eat, things like that. That really kind of recognizing, actually there is quite a bit in my world that I can control right now, and so that's where I'm going to sit, that's where I'm going to focus. again, really acknowledging your thoughts and your experiences, and really validating those as well. That it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's actually a very appropriate response. Um, Often for my clients, I would be more concerned if they said, I'm doing wonderful all the time throughout this, because actually experiencing sadness and distress and frustration and overwhelm is a really appropriate response to what we're experiencing right now. So it's so important to normalize that. And also just coming back into your body then as that sense of grounding. So again, while we can't control what's happening, we can control our response to it. So doing some grounding techniques can be really useful here, where you use some sensory kind of aspects of your environment to help ground you. So that might be just really being present focused, where you look around and name 5 things that you can see. You listen, name 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, activating that kind of sense of touch, 2 things that you can taste, and then 1 thing that you can smell, and taking some really good solid deep breaths within there. And that's a beautiful grounding technique for really any situation that can just help to bring you back into the present and out of kind of that space of feeling really, really out of control again. And then also refocusing your attention and your awareness. So once the kind of storm has started to subside a little bit, or that wave has started to go down, then you redirect your attention to the things that you were doing already. So focusing on the present moment and feeling that kind of sense of achievement and accomplishment again. Also thinking about your values is quite important too at the moment. So values are kind of driven by things that we maybe admire in other people sometimes, maybe famous people, and our spirituality, things that really guide us. So the way that we want to be in the world, where a goal might be, I want to walk to that river, and when I reach the river, I've reached my goal. Whereas a value is much more like, I want to walk west. There isn't a definite ending to it, but it's a general direction we want to be kind of moving in. And if we're living a life that's very out of line with our values, then we're going to have a really strong internal tension. So, an example of some values might be compassion, or humor, or trustworthy, or honest, or there's a range of them. So think to yourself, how do I want to be within this pandemic? When I look to others, what do I admire? What do I respect? What values do I want to kind of promote to the world? And really thinking about what some of the barriers might be that are getting in the way of you living a life that's in line with your values. So important to think about that too. And when I say compassion, coming back to that, being incredibly compassionate towards others, obviously, but also towards yourself. So a really nice question to ask yourself just is, if a friend came to me struggling in the same way that I am, what would I say to a friend right now? What advice would I give them? And give that to yourself. It's a really nice way to be able to tap into what you do need and how to respond to yourself in that way. Another nice little compassion exercise is when you do feel overwhelming emotion, or you feel stressed or distressed, adding the words, and that's okay, to the end of the sentence. So for example, I feel really stressed, and that's okay. I feel sad, and that's okay. I really, really miss home, and that's okay. I know I say home a lot, and I mean Ireland. Really, really miss Ireland, and that's okay. Still refer to it as home. So there's just some little kind of compassion breaks that you can give to yourself throughout all of this. And I guess that's the general theme of what I wanted to kind of really portray today is, a very accepting stance of meeting yourself wherever you're at each day of this process, and not trying to get rid of emotions or struggle against them or feel a lot of discomfort when you feel overwhelmed, but to actually meet it with acceptance, to say, it's like when you get stuck in quicksand and you struggle against it, you could just go down even quicker rather than just, spreading out. And it's really similar with our emotional experience as well. The more we struggle against it, the longer it's going to stick around, rather than just making space and going, okay, this is what I feel right now, and it will pass, and that's okay. Don't have to be scared of it or struggle against it. So if you could take anything from this talk today, I would hope it would be just that: acceptance, accepting of where you are, who you are, wherever and whenever you are. And so with that acceptance and with that compassion, it will just make an already incredibly challenging time just a little bit easier to cope with. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate your time. Feel free to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. We're Aruna Psychology, Aruna, which means a new day, psychology. And we have nice little kind of daily reminders of just some of the things I was talking about today, to try and keep you on track throughout this this whole time. Okay. Thank you. Bye.